Good evening, everybody, or everyone. I just listened to Jundo Cohen Roshi's talk on what is a retreat. And I'd like to comment a little bit on this whole business of Zen teachers and who is and who is not qualified to be a Zen teacher and according to whom. The point of reference that I have, of course, is myself and my teacher, and perhaps his teacher before him, because my teacher was a direct result of his teacher, and I believe, am a direct result of my teacher. That's how the lineage goes. That's how it's always been, from the Buddha's time to the present. All of a sudden, over the last couple of decades, we have introduced in the United States another party. It's not unlike in Japan, another party was introduced as well, in terms of the training temples and so on, and Sotoshu. But here in the United States, Zen was a brand new thing, brought here by some very early teachers, including my Dharma grandfather, Matsuoka Roshi, who came here in, I think it was 1939, and established Zen centers all over the United States. But he wasn't a very, he didn't write books and things like that. He didn't have a Richard Baker to promote him and promote his Zen center. His Zen centers were much more like living room practice. He was very early and initiated Zen practice in the living rooms and so forth. He would assign people roles like Ino or Tenzo or somebody like that, and then they would get on-the-job training basically to fill the role. And that was because at the time he was doing this, nobody else had anything formal going on. He was the very first person to create a temple here in the United States, as far as I know, even before Kennett Roshi. Anyway, so his idea was to make Zen, I should say it a different way. He was in America, and he wanted to make a Zen that was, or teach a Zen that was more in line with American values and the way Americans learn, as opposed to Temple Zen, which was, or monastic Zen, which was what was being practiced in Japan. It seems to me that all of the early Japanese Zen teachers who came to the United States had that basic idea in mind. They were leaving a culture that supported monastic practice and had centuries of experience in that. It was part of the culture. Here in the United States, it's not part of the culture, decidedly not part of the culture. We're used to people having churches where they go to church once or twice a week and listen to a sermon, and they pray and they sing and things like that, and then they go home. For the most part, many Zen centers are like that here. We are often open only 1 or 2 days a week, and we offer zazen, dharma talks, retreats, and things like that. Now, what Matsuoka did was he simplified things because it was out of necessity. But it worked for him, and I think it worked for his students. What he didn't do was try to replicate the practices that were going on in Japan. Rightfully so, in my opinion. We're not Japanese. We certainly are not Japanese. And when we behave like Japanese, when we're not, it's inauthentic as far as I'm concerned. I see American Zen teachers dressed in all manner of clothing, and hats and all those kinds of things, walking around as if they're walking on water, smiling this fake smile, and passing themselves off as fully ordained, authentic Zen teachers. In many respects, and I don't mean to be particularly vitriolic here, but I think they're fake. They're church Zen teachers. They're people who go and practice in Zendo and then go home and be part of the regular world, which is okay. I mean, that's fine. But it's a pretense. They go dress up in their robes and their koromos and okesas and take on a air, if you will, of Japanese authenticity. And they have that because they have this lineage, a very strong and powerful lineage, like Maizumi or Suzuki, one of those kinds of people who were very popular and prolific in their teaching, had many students, opened up many Zen centers, had many Dharma heirs, and so on. What happened after they died, I think, was their descendants, their disciples, floundered around, and my guess is that they decided that they needed to follow the Japanese, and the Japanese were very smart about that. They moved right in and offered support for the various Zen centers and temples. So they became much more Japanese, and I think mimicked that sort of ceremonial stuff. Okay, so anyway, they know how to tie knots, and they know how to light incense, and they know how to bow, and they know how to do senpai, and they even know what senpai is. I mean, they know all that good stuff. What does that have to do with Zen? I really am serious about that question. What in the hell does that have to do with Zen? Absolutely nothing, as far as I'm concerned. It has to do with high church. It has to do with liturgical acumen and practice, but it has nothing to do with Zen. What is Zen? When you think about it, what is Zen? What are we teaching Zen is by teaching people how to bow and how to light incense? Now, one argument could be made that we're teaching a form that acts as a vessel for the wine, and vessels are necessary. I don't doubt that. But they are not the same as being out in the world, facing people and helping to relieve suffering. They're not about at all, in any sense, how to relieve suffering, how to set oneself aside in service to others. They're about the ego dressing up and parading around as if there's something they're not. Probably going to get in a little trouble for this short little video here, but really, who cares? I've spent my life in service to people. As a doctor, as a psychotherapist, as a priest, as a fellow veteran, as a chaplain in a veteran motorcycle association. I've worked in soup kitchens. I've been homeless. I was a high school dropout. I got shot in the head. Overcame all the paralysis that entails. Worked my way through school and got a PhD in social work from a very fine school, I might add. And when I found my teacher, he lived about 90 miles away from me, and I drove pretty much every weekend up to the mountains and practiced with him. At one point, we built a house near him, near his temple, and I called it Rocky Top Refuge, and we did retreats there, including a 30-day ongo on behalf of Naropa University. In any event, I practice what I think of as an engaged practice. I'm out there in the world. Um, I deal straight up with people who are hurting, who are suffering. Um, we do all kinds of things. Collect food, distribute food. We assist each other. I sit often, or have sat often, at the federal building with a small sign that says peace. That's all it says. I'm bearing witness for peace. Sitting there in robes doing zazen at the federal building. I like to think of that as presenting an alternative to violence. I also practice at the Veterans Park we have here. And I think people have come to appreciate that. They've often come up and asked me if they could learn how to do that, and I will invite them to sit with me and teach them how to practice zazen. It's sort of like getting up off the cushion and taking the cushion with you, which is something many Zen teachers teach. True Zen doesn't occur in a Zendo. True Zen doesn't occur in a monastery. True Zen occurs in real life, in actual situations. At a gas station, when somebody asks you for money for gas, when you see somebody injured or hurt, do you help? And do you help without advertising that help? Do you do what Buddha taught in the Diamond Sutra? Just be generous, not advertising the fact. No duality involved. There's no giver, there's no giving, there's no receiver. There's just generosity, period. Yeah. Anyway, I just wanted to make a few comments, I think, about this business of Zen teachers and who authorizes them and who doesn't. Well, I'll tell you right now, institutions don't do that. Teachers do that. My teacher did that. His teacher before him did that. And his teacher before him did that. In 600 years in Japan, the teachers did that. The teachers did that. The teachers had nothing to do with any teacher association or any association that bills itself as somehow the gatekeeper. The gatekeeper in Zen is and always will be the teacher-student relationship and mind-to-mind transmission. And that's that. You could say take it or leave it. Anyway, you all have a good evening. Thank you.